But I think when you see the stories of like people who didn't have much, and coach brought them under his wing and really nurtured them and showed them that they mattered, it was so important to them. And these people went on believing in themselves and becoming doctors and lawyers and coaches themselves. And really just the beauty of treating everybody like they matter and they have something to give was a refrain in a lot of the messages coming in this past week.
That was American record holder and Olympic bronze medalist Deena Kastor speaking about her coach, Coach Joe Vigil, who passed away at 95 years old this past week. Obviously, Coach Vigil had a remarkable impact on Deena, as well as many other athletes he coached throughout the years, programs, people, teams, the sport as a whole and collectively. And so I thought it would be a great idea to invite Deena onto the podcast, perhaps, probably not debatably, his most impressive and accomplished athlete throughout his time as a coach, to come on the podcast and share stories and memories and legacy and the impact of Coach Joe Vigil. I really enjoyed this one. It was touching to hear about the life of someone who has deeply impacted the sport I love, and I hope you guys enjoy this one as much as I did. If you do, share it with a friend, a family member, a teammate, someone who you think would find value and benefit from it. Give us a 5-star review. It takes between 3 and 5 seconds to do, and make sure you are following or subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen so you never miss another episode. Please do that. It doesn't hurt to do, and if you don't enjoy our other podcasts, you can always unsubscribe. But I would appreciate you following so you don't miss the next episode that comes out. That's how we grow the podcast, which is ultimately my goal, to have the biggest and most impact I can possibly have. Without further ado, enjoy this thoughtful, deep discussion around the life of Coach Joe Vigil with the one and only Deena Kastor. Ladies and gentlemen, she's back, Deena Kastor. I was thinking as we started this one, I was like, when did I have her last on? Because I was like, it could have been a year ago or it could have been a few months ago. I think it was February. And that was one of my favorite conversations I've had ever on the podcast. So welcome back to the podcast today.
Thank you, Dominic. It's a pleasure. Unfortunate for the circumstances, I've already cried about it once today, but hopefully I'll hold myself together for this conversation.
Tears are good. So if they come, that's natural. That's good. They are welcome here. Speak to who we're honoring today. And specifically, I told you kind of the story of how I came across your book and how that was fundamental to me back in, I think, 7th grade when I picked it up. But the cool thing about your book was the man you're about to speak about was a core part of that book. And so I felt like just as much as I learned about you, I also learned about him, and I formed a deep appreciation for him. And through that and through his passing, God rest his soul, reached out to you because I did want to do some sort of episode in tribute to him, because I'm sure, as you'll speak to in today's conversation, a lot of your accomplishments, and as I've come to understand, you even being in the sport, wouldn't have been possible without him.
Definitely. I would have retired after college and opened up a bakery. So I would have been a plumper version of my current self, and probably not as happy. I feel like Coach Joe Vigil, I had the privilege of working with him for my first 4 years out of college in Colorado, and then another 4 years here in Mammoth Lakes, California, where we moved together. He was an extraordinary man from the first phone call. I had been running since the age of 11 when I graduated from college, and one phone conversation with him, I realized I knew absolutely nothing about the sport that I had been taking part in. And he was using terms like training methodology and living an athlete's lifestyle. And I was out of college, so I ran hard and I partied hard, just like a lot of college students. I didn't realize that all the actions that you do throughout the day, it's really a 24/7 job. Every decision you make, from what you're eating and how you're sleeping and And what surprised me in that conversation was also your interpersonal relationships. He believed a lot in making sure that you were nurturing relationships and nurturing your social life in a way that made you feel whole and like you weren't sacrificing for the sport, but everything that you were doing and the relationships you had were supporting you in the sport. So choosing those relationships. I remember him having a conversation with an athlete who didn't have a very supportive family structure. And he's like, well, find the support on the side. Like find it in your teammates, find it in friends, find it in a teacher or someone else that you respect. Like whatever it is, follow your passion and find the support to pursue it. So just so many lessons right from the start, from that first phone conversation to moving to Alamosa, Colorado, and him taking a chance on me. And I really just opened up to learning everything he had to offer. I always left his house with a full stomach because him and his wife loved to cook. Caroline and him loved to cook together. So I'd show up kind of opportunistically around lunchtime and I'd leave with a full stomach and a good book in my hand. And I just feel like my growth at that time was so exponential. I was just taking it in, but also realizing that as he was building me physically, he was also building me psychologically. And those two things going hand in hand, that building and adaptation and the neurotransmitters rewiring to be more positive and optimistic, and seeing firsthand or experiencing it firsthand how that makes you grow in an instant when you're in mid struggle of a workout. Just that flip of psychology, it was so powerful that success felt easy. It was so strange that I'd been struggling to be good for so long, and it all of a sudden became easy to be successful because I had the right mindset. And I think when you have the right mindset, your physiology also supports you because you have good hormones going through your body and good neurotransmitters. So the whole from the very first day I stepped into his office, it was just an upward trajectory. And although I'm a lot slower version of myself today, I'll say that the lessons he continued to teach me still applied because we talked on the phone quite often.
I remember hearing this story and reading about it in the book where I think you diminish how good you were in college, but I've heard you say you weren't that good. And you didn't really, as you say, like think about really running at the next level until I think one of your coaches or assistant coaches told you about Coach Vigil. You guys had a phone call. He was reluctant at first, I believe, if I'm not mistaken,
He
and then
was.
kind of accepted you taking a visit, and the rest is history there. I think in my own life, if you meet someone for the first time, and I had this experience with you, although I already had thought very highly of you, like you can tell when you click with a person and you're like, oh, we should be friends. You're a really good person. Take me through that with Coach V Hill, whether it was over the phone or in person, where you thought, wow, this is a person that I want in my corner. And this is a person who can go on this journey with me.
Yeah, that's a great question. On the phone, I was more in a selfish moment when I was listening to his wise words on the phone, and I was just like, "Oh my God, this is the person I have to be with and learn from," because he made me feel like there was still something in me that needed to develop, and instead of feeling it in a discouraging way, it felt like exhilarating to me. Like, oh my gosh, I've been in this sport for so long, and this man knows so much that I wanted to be around him to learn from him. And it wasn't until probably a week into being with him, because I was just like a deer in headlights that first week, like wanting to show him my dedication by showing up at his doorstep and saying like, I'm not just visiting, I moved here and I really want to make this work. And he was like, what? um, but after I listened to him for a while and he asked me questions, I found myself sitting in the truck with him while the rest of the team was going longer because he was trying to build up my mileage, and really having meaningful conversations. And in those truck rides, really feeling like this was a friendship. And obviously I respected him on the coaching level, but I feel like he cared about my development. And so it felt symbiotic. It felt like I was kind of reigniting, my excitement was reigniting his own excitement in coaching. And we would later have conversations about that we were kind of there for each other when we both needed each other. So that felt beautiful to be that person for him in a time where he needed it, but also he obviously saw that I was a little puppy needing some direction, a stray dog needing some direction in my own life. And I think from the very beginning, if there's one like overlying message that was most important, is that he wasn't just building athletes, he was building people. So, he really cared about PRs and doing well, but what he cared most about is that you use those lessons to be a better person.
For you, how would you describe him? Was he a coach? Was he a friend? Was he a second father? Was he a
Mm.
mentor? Was he all of those things? Like, what would
I
you
would
pin it down?
Yeah, I would say mentor for sure. But like for me, game changer, he was like my launching pad. Um, yeah, I would consider him a mentor for sure. Like he lived 95 years. None of it was easy. He worked so hard for all of it. But 95 years old is a good run at life. But he started with his dad passed when he was really young, and so he had to support his family. And I remember him telling stories about bucking cabbage. I don't even know what that means. Is that just like how you chop it in the field? I should have asked more questions. But he would talk about bucking cabbage and like just working in the fields as a young boy trying to earn money to support his family, his mom and sister. So I just think it's his work ethic came from that. And then he was played football, and he was in the Navy. Like his work ethic was so big, and he expected that out of everybody else. And so for him, he was like, I'm going to expect a lot out of you. And it's your job to rise to the occasion. And so, I mean, it was relentless. It was Monday mornings was lappers on a grass field, kind of like 400-meter repeats on a grass field to build agility and cross country. And then Tuesdays was mile repeats at the park. And then Wednesdays was a hilly run with downhill sprints to facilitate greater speed. And Thursdays would have been shorter reps. And Fridays was finally a rest day. And then you had tempo runs on Saturdays and a long run on Sunday. It was just like Sundays were like, oh my gosh, I only have to run once today. It's going to be a grind. But like, then you just sleep the rest of the day. And it was grueling, but unless you lived your life, a life of recovery in between, it would be impossible to keep showing up like that. And so I just kept making decisions to to be ready for it. And it was amazing that once I could get that right, once I could get in like a ton of high quality food and sleep 10 hours a night and take a 2-hour nap every afternoon and sit in the Rio Grande River to ice down my legs. It was like all these things that I was learning along the way in order to feel better when I showed up the next day to give it another go. So we really only had 1 or 2 recovery days out of the week. And even sometimes those recovery days weren't really recovery days, but I loved that lesson of making things work and not sacrificing, but making the decisions to fulfill your dreams. But also the camaraderie within the group and the focus on friendship. Like after every practice, we were in the cafe eating together and supporting each other. And so many great lessons. He didn't have it easy, but he lived that motto of he was a ambassador for ASICS, just like I am an athlete for ASICS. And he was the one that introduced me to the mental approach to running, but then to find a sport company that ASICS is, that is grounded and founded in the acronym Anima Sana Incorpore Sano, or a sound mind and a sound body. He lived that every day.
On that phone call or in those first few weeks working with him, what do you think he saw in you that made him take that chance on you? Because it's inevitable he saw the 219 American record and the bronze medal, or maybe at least glimpses of it, that you could do that. What were some of those things that, looking back, you think he saw in you? And was that ever a conversation towards the end of your career of like, coach, what were you thinking those
Yeah.
first few weeks? What did you see in me?
Well, he was reluctant because he was like, "You're not very fast." He told me that off the cuff. You're not very fast, but with some discipline and hard work, you can get there. It's not going to be overnight. Don't expect to be an overnight success. So it was like a grind, and I knew I was in it for the long haul. But I think what he did see was a commitment to uproot my life in Arkansas at the university there and move sight unseen to be dedicated to him. I was a listener. I asked a lot of questions. I'm entirely coachable. So I think he saw that in me, that he could tell me to do something in practice, or what to incorporate when I got home, or to keep a gratitude list, or to journal. And I did it. Whatever he asked of, I did it. And then there was always a follow-up, like, okay, so how did that work out? And it kind of facilitated like a deeper reflection on how things were being applied and working towards my training, and my beliefs in what I was doing. So I think first he saw commitment. It wasn't until maybe a year in that he saw that I could do something on the national stage and then the international stage. But I will say that it seemed like whatever he said, like if you could run your mile repeats in 4:45, so that's like 4 to 6 mile repeats in 4:45, you're going to break the American record. And I was like, okay, so my goal is to do this in practice. And then doing it in practice, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go break the American record. And I went out and broke the American record because not out of arrogance, but because he made me believe that if I can do this, then this is what's possible. He did that with Meb when Meb was running 6 miles on the Green Church Road here in a tempo run. He said, if you could run the American record in the 10,000 meters, if you can run it in 6 miles on Green Church Road at 7,000 feet altitude, then you're gonna break the record in Stanford in a couple months' time. And Meb did it. He ran the American record in that 6 mile window, and then went to sea level and broke the American record. So he was just so good at like knowing what it takes physiologically, but also seeing our psychology in the moment, like believing in the training and being in a good state of mind and showing up excited to practice. Those were all things he really believed in. Like he had to be at the practices, even though him and his wife Caroline lived in Green Valley, Arizona. He lived in Mammoth for 4 years between 2000 and 2004, the Olympics, to make sure he could look us in the eyes and be like, okay, they're ready, or no, maybe I need to tame down the training today, and take one of the repeats off the back end so that we can like build belief that this is possible. So he was really into wanting to see our enthusiasm, to share in the enthusiasm, and kind of make it like a not just a physiological striving of hitting times, but this camaraderie that went with meeting with your teammates every morning. So he was really a believer in all of that and just living holistically. And he lived that every day of his life. He lived kind of like a life of affirmation. Like every day he would wake up at 4:30 and he would do his 100 push-ups, and he would do some studying on physiology and like the latest studies that are coming out. So he was really, really into continuing to learn, even up until a month ago when he was telling me about this journal he was reading. And then he was sitting in McDonald's with Coach Joe Prince at a nearby high school, having a cup of coffee, discussing the physiology of this new science that was coming out. He really dove into double tempo runs to see if that was a detriment or a help to athletes. So he was just always had his finger on the pulse, and went quickly in the end, thankfully. And it was painful, but it was quick. And so glad for that. Glad he was still diving into books at 95 years old before life got the best of him.
When I hear that, I think of a human who is ultimately obsessed. If you're 95 years old, you're not coaching anymore, and you're still reading rich literature around human physiology and all of the things that come with that. You are utterly obsessed with that subject. For him, why do you think it was running, and why do you think he was so enamored and obsessed with this sport where you put one foot in front of the other?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely started when he was coaching the football team at a local high school, and found out that there was no cross country coaches, and there was these kids that had joined cross country, and he felt so bad for them that he quit football and went and coached these cross country kids, and started learning about how to run and how to be a cross country coach, probably reading early editions of Track and Field News magazine, and he was dedicated to like raising money so they can go to the state meet coming up, and they made sandwiches. He told the story so often. They made sandwiches in the hotel room to save money. And they all placed in the state meet. They all did so well. And he was like, oh, that was really great. I had my hands on them for a small amount of time and they were so successful. And I think it got him excited about growth and development. So he started studying it more and applying what he was reading to the kids in their training. And it was just a love affair from then, like just this constant, I think it was feeding his desire to learn, but also being able to see the application of it right before his eyes was so exciting and intoxicating that he just lived a life of it. And I think what I admired about him most of all is how he spent his life learning. 95 years of reading books and really dissecting the sport. And really, I guess we were all guinea pigs in his eyes, that if he was like applying what he was learning and it was working, that's great. And if it wasn't, he'd apply something new. But he had, like, by the time I got to him, he had a pretty strict regiment of what he knew worked, because it worked for the perfect score at the national championships in cross country and all the accolades of Pat Porter, the 8-time U.S. cross country champion, 2-time Olympian that he coached, who had passed away some years back. So he had applied, he kind of had like a bread and butter of what was working, but he shared knowledge with people in an instant. He seemed to be like a magnet. I just remember fondly times at the Olympic Training Center when we were training down in Chula Vista there. And we would have lunches and dinners that lasted 3 and 4 hours because people just kept coming up to the table and wanting to ask him questions. Other coaches from other sports, athletes of varied sports. So he was just this wealth of knowledge, and people wanted to tap into that all the time. And he was so willing to share.
Oh, so many things I could ask you from here. If I'm not mistaken, he was born in I just looked it up, November 25th, 1929. And so he lived through World War II. He lived through a lot of different events that I think people listening in 2025 who were born within recent history can only fathom what it was like growing up and living through some of those times. Did he ever share how much those experiences shaped him? You mentioned the story of, working hard to basically feed and provide for his mom and his sister. How much do you think those experiences shaped the good-hearted human being that he was?
Yeah, 100%. His lifestyle early on was a contributor. The Great Depression. I mean, he was way back there, experiencing some of the hardest moments in American history. And we would often talk even about ASICS after World War II just becoming a shoe brand, because Kihachiro Onitsuka saw after a war-torn Japan how movement and exercise kind of boosted the morale of his family, and then how it boosted the morale of his community. So he wanted to like bring it to his whole nation. So like, let's put people in athletic shoes and get them moving because it's going to boost their spirits. We would talk about that all the time. Simultaneous to his passing and just being flooded with so many people reaching out and sharing their own memories. One woman was saying how he created, and he used to talk of this so fondly, he created a little running group of running moms in Alamosa, Colorado, to get moms out of postpartum depression. And so this one girl was reciting a story how she had to go to these practices all the time, and her whole family would show up, and just how generous he was and encouraging, and that she now lives a running life. She's run her whole life because of that gift of him. So just a lot of great stories that he just, his generosity, he didn't get much, but he gave a lot. And I think showing that you care about people, even though they're the underdog, the underprivileged, he seemed to reach out and give an olive branch to those people more often, because he could have used it in his younger years. But I think when you see the stories of like people who didn't have much, and coach brought them under his wing and really nurtured them and showed them that they mattered, it was so important to them. And these people went on believing in themselves and becoming doctors and lawyers and coaches themselves. And really just the beauty of treating everybody like they matter and they have something to give was a refrain in a lot of the messages coming in this past week.
Do you think he did that because he didn't have that himself growing up?
I definitely do. Definitely think that he could have used a Coach Vigil when he was younger, but I also think it was his satisfaction of seeing someone that didn't have much, not in their pocket and not in their belief system, someone that didn't have that, and seeing them blossom under a few life lessons shared. He could just share one story with someone and it would inspire them, and they would go on to believe in themselves. Like, I feel fortunate that I was able to be by his side for 8 years, like just sucking in all the stories and goodness that he had to share. But I've heard so many comments of people that just met him one day, had a cup of coffee with him at the stadium, um, in Eugene, Oregon, or in Sacramento during the Olympic trials, saw him in the lobby and bought him a cup of coffee. He was a sucker if you bought him a cup of coffee, and he would just sit there for hours and shares a story or two, and then that person would go on and be better because of it. So he just had that effect on people, just making them believe like they could be a little better at anything that they were trying to pursue. He had a gift of storytelling, but storytelling in a way that was a life lesson, snuck in there in between.
What was your favorite post-race memory with Coach V Hill?
Mm. I would say a moment that I was in tears. Imagine that. My first national cross country championship, I had been working with him for 6 months, and I was like, could not believe how strong I got in such a short amount of time. And I went into the national championships just knowing that I was going to make the US team. I just had to get in the top 6. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am so strong. I feel like powerful in my mind and my body. And I towed the starting line, from what I remember being such a clear thought that I am feeling true confidence for the very first time in my life. And the race went off and I got devoured. I just tried to stick with it the whole time. I think it was like 35th place. And I was just devastated after the race. And I was sobbing, like the big cries where you're like heaving and coughing, into the hotel towel, and just like bawling, just how delusional am I to think that I could do this as a profession. And I was so hard on myself, just truly felt like a failure. And I remember hearing a knock at the door, and it was my family first trying to tell me that, oh, I shouldn't be sad. I should be really grateful and happy. And you can't like fake an emotion. Wasn't working, but he came in a few minutes later, and he said, I'm glad that you're pissed off. Like, it means that you care. You're invested. You've put a lot of work into the last 6 months, mentally and physically. And so instead of feeling like a failure in this moment, let this emotion, let this feeling of disappointment affirm to you that you care a lot about the journey that you're on. And we just need to get back to work. And it was so great to hear that, such a hard emotion. Like, I felt disappointment. I mean, as athletes, we feel disappointment more than we feel elation and joy and pride, because we're our hardest critics. But for him to allow me to feel the disappointment, but define it as caring, changed everything going forward. So I never felt a failure from there on out. It was like everything was either I reached a goal or I learned from it. I reached a goal or I learned from it. And so I loved that lesson very early on working with him, that we fall short of our goals so often as athletes, and you just got to get back to the drawing board. Know that something didn't click, something didn't work, or maybe it's just going to take a little more time doing exactly what you're doing. And that was probably the greatest lesson for me that I needed, not just in that moment, but for a long career in this sport, to just take everything as a lesson on moving forward.
What was the atmosphere like at practice? I know you wrote about this in your book and you share a lot of stories and whatnot, but what was the atmosphere like? I'm curious to hear you say it audibly.
Yeah, I think showing up to practice every day, we knew we were going to be, the workout was going to be demanding. So it was, in a sense, scary, but it was also fun because it was almost like he knew what you were thinking. Like when you were like, this is going to suck in your head. And he's like, this is going to be amazing. You've got this great hill in front of you that's going to challenge your relentlessness and just charge forward. And I'm like, oh my God, how did he know what I was thinking? Like, could he see it in my eyes? And so he did turn that like kind of like nervous tension of putting in the work into an excitement to develop yourself in that day. And like immediately when the workout was done, it was like a good job. Now go rest. Like that's the next thing. Like your work isn't over. Now you have to go do some really hard rest at home. And so I mean, his impression was constant at practice because he was very verbal. But it lasted throughout the day because he gave you something to do as you were leaving practice, like go get your rest, go get something to eat. We're gonna have class. I mean, sometimes he like had us come to his house for class, and he would give us printouts about VO2 max, which I still don't entirely understand. It would give us printouts of our VO2 max so that we understood that when we would go to Colorado Springs to get VO2 max tested at the Olympic Training Center, what those numbers meant when we got him back. And we didn't just get those numbers. He sat us down individually and talked about our oxygen uptake and how we could help it, how we can grow, like what workouts we need to focus on a little more, like giving a little more, so that we can develop our VO2 max more. So he was definitely in those times a scientist, but on a day-to-day basis, he felt more like a psychologist.
Do you think, I've heard stories in this conversation in your book about how invested in the science he was. Do you think he coached more from the perspective of like he viewed coaching as an art versus science? Where do you think he rested on that?
Oh, he had a doctorate in exercise physiology. So I want to say he'd see it as a scientist, but he also would say, like, if you did mention the fact that he's psychologically brilliant, when we're in the heat of hard work, he would say, no, I'm just a coach. So very humble, and humble as a coach, but also when my dad was we were just on a family vacation at the beach, and my dad was recalling a story where we were at the national championships in cross country. Again, it was the next year after my disappointment, and my dad said, "So, Coach, how's Deena doing? How's she gonna do?" And he turned to my dad and said, "She's not worth a damn." And I went on to win my first cross country title. So he would always answer my dad from that moment forward. It almost was like a superstition that if he said that, I might perform well. So whenever my dad would ask him how I was doing, even in a phone call in Alamosa, he'd tell my dad that I'm not worth a damn. And my dad would say, "Oh, that makes me real proud of her. Glad I raised her right." So just humble. He let our feet do the talking, just like as a coach, if he humbly said he's just a coach, he would let us get on the playing field and show that he's a pretty darn good one.
The day you retired, or the day you decided you still run and would run faster than me. So, and you'll probably be running to the day you die, but professional running, the day you decided to take a step back, what was that conversation like with Coach Vigil?
Yeah, I think I mean, he said that you use the sport to develop who you are, and you can still participate in it. He was always encouraging, even when I was early in my career, like, this is a life. You're doing this for your life. We're not just focused on the national championships coming up in 3 months' time. Like, what you do today is going to keep you in the sport for a lifetime. So he also knew that it was important to have joy. He used to entertain me when we moved to Mammoth with exploration runs, because he knew, like, sometimes I just need to get out and see a place, like, not be caught in the monotony of being in the same place week in and week out, grinding through mile repeats in the same spot or easy runs in the same spot. And we would keep our hard runs, our hard workouts, in our fake tracks, because Andrew and I hadn't built the track here yet, so we had spray painted lines on the road. So we'd keep our workouts there, but he knew every once in a while I just needed to be on a trailhead and just be let loose without a watch, and explore a place I hadn't been before. And he knew that was very much a part of me. So he said in that late conversation of, my fastest days are long behind me. I want to invest more in family time right now. It is an absolute joy, even though I'm running the Sydney Marathon in a few weeks, and I am very underprepared for it. Um, and the preparation, I know I can make it to the finish line. I'm knocking on wood as I say that. I know I can make it to the finish line, but if I'm fitter, it's going to feel better, to go the 26.2 mile distance. And so to be able to just go out, I've missed training, but I haven't missed a second of family time, right? So I'm running with my daughter 5 miles this morning, and it's a little slower than I need to be running, but how priceless is that? So I only have a few more years of that before she's off to college. So he knew that I loved the sport, and that I wasn't retiring from the sport. I was just retiring from appearance fees and going for wins and records, and it's still just as satisfying. And I remember him telling me that, like, it can still be just as rewarding, in 20 years time that it was. And I'll say that it still is. I still get great joy out of, like, grinding through a workout, even if it's not for anything. And even yesterday on a 13-mile run in the backcountry, like, I literally couldn't stop thinking about how grateful I was that my body is still letting me do this. Because so many times people are like, how are your knees? How are your hips? How's your body holding up? And I'm grateful that it still does. I don't have any aches and pains, and I can still run 13 miles back to lakes I had never been to. And that's what he instilled in me, is, like, just continue to find joy in the exploration and the process of keeping your mind and your body fit. And that's the whole game, right? Is just your fitness up here is equally as important as the fitness of your physical body. And I'm so glad to have learned that through him.
Totally. Are there any specific stories, even small ones, that you feel like capture the heart of your relationship with Coach Vigil?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I would say, the very first time I met him and was just like, who is this man that is attracting all these people? I was on the World Junior Cross Country team. It was in Aix-les-Bains, France. And I went down for dinner one evening and was looking for my teammates, and everybody was just surrounding this table. It was a 10-seater table in the dining room of our hotel. And it was people like Pat Porter and a lot of the senior men sitting at the table, because he was the senior men's coach that year. And then there was another circle of people standing around them, and then two deep of people just standing around. And he was telling stories. And it was just so priceless to me to see how captivating he was. And so years later, I hadn't seen him since then. That was in high school. Years later, I'm talking to him on the phone, and I didn't realize it was him until he started talking to me on the phone. Like, this is the guy in France that was like court, like holding court in the dining room. And that's what he did everywhere. It could just be me and him going out for breakfast at a race somewhere, and we'd be in the lot, what is it, the lobby lounge or the restaurant, and before you knew it, it was just people standing around listening to him tell stories.
For those listening, including myself, who never got the privilege to meet him and learn from him directly, we get to learn about him and meet him in ways indirectly through you. What are the takeaway messages you think you would want to leave with the people out there listening? Ways that you think you'd want people to train or think differently or act differently?
Yeah, I believe time and time again, he just taught me um, that what you desire is entirely you are entirely capable of reaching your lofty goals. It's just going to take time and like decision making. And to for him it was like, gosh, one good decision really helps you get towards your goals. But if you made two in a day, how much closer you'd get. Or if you made, like, you just like compound these decisions on top of each other, and before you know it, you're living your wildest dreams. And he did that in a beautiful way, letting you know that those micro decisions in your day, from like your attitude, he always wanted you to have a good attitude, um, to the phone call with your parents, to checking in on friends, um, to being philanthropic and generous to the people around you. Like, don't throw away your running stuff when your shoes are ready to retire. Like, find someone to give them to, and better yet, order them a brand new pair. Like, he was just like, I think really realizing maybe how physiologically it resonates to be generous. Like, it is intoxicating. It feels so much better to give to people than to even receive. So just living a life of generosity, whether that's in spirit or actual giving to people and giving to your goals. It's just like feeding your bank all the time. Just give to yourself, give to others. And if you keep feeding that, you're going to be living your best self in sport and in life. And that's really all he ever wanted out of his athletes, is to groom them to be good athletes, so they can realize that all those decisions they made to be a better athlete are the same things you can apply to your life to make you a successful parent, a successful friend, a successful member of your community. And he believed in all of that, being generous to all of the rings of your surroundings, even on those world cross teams, letting you know in that team meeting right off the bat, you are not here for yourself. You are representing your family, you're representing the United States of America, your community, your church. It was just like everything was more fanfarish and celebratory, because he wanted you to have an emotional investment and not just reading what your watch says.
I love it. Such good wisdom right there. I think in podcasts or interviews, I ask a question that comes up in my head, you reply, but you only have so much space to say what you want to say, given the context of that question. For you, is there anything that you haven't stated publicly or shared about Coach Vigil that you'd like the opportunity to say or state or share that I haven't given you today?
Oh, I mean, I would say he makes a great pozole. That was my favorite day to go to his house for lunch. Chop. He would get all of the mise en place, get all of his vegetables chopped early in the morning and wrapped in little bowls and prepared perfectly. But even as you ate it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like everything's chopped so perfectly and in unison. And he's like, preparation is everything. Do you remember Juma Ikonga said, the will to win is nothing without the will to prepare to win. And you've got to do that in cooking too. You got to prepare for an excellent bowl of pozole. So everything just like came with these grand lessons. And then he would go into his library off the kitchen and pull out a book and flip to the Juma Ikanga quote and share it with me. Like, that's where I read it. So just a mastermind of wisdom, but using that wisdom and applying it to everything in life. That's the beauty this sport gives us. We know how to, when we can figure out how to thrive in our running shoes, we'd be cheating our lives if we weren't applying those same lessons to it.
Deena, for you moving forward, how do you plan on embodying the legacy, the memory, the love of Coach Joe Vigil, and what are ways that the listener can do the same as well?
Yeah, great question. I think just living a good full life, right? Like just finding joy and awe. He found that every day in coaching and learning and sharing with others. And if we could do the same, like really feel how privileged it is to open a book and gain knowledge and then share it with those around you, the privilege of being able to get out in your running shoes every day and really push yourselves and figure out how to get over the fatigue and the doubt in certain moments, and really sit in those uncomfortable emotions like disappointment and feel how it resonates so that you can grow from it instead of be defined by it. I think if we can live that way every day, just in awe and privilege of the experiences that we are putting ourselves in, would be a beautiful way to tribute to him.
Amazing. Deena, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, giving me time out of your busy life to honor and remember a man who had such a deep impact on you. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've heard countless stories this week and will continue to, but also the ways that, he's impacted people through you talking about him has been cool to see. So keep up the good work. Appreciate the opportunity. And I'm sure he's looking above in a better place, proud of you, his athlete. And yeah, you're amazing. Appreciate the time and the stories. And I know it's never easy to share such in-depth things about someone who has passed, but he's in a better place and looking down. So really appreciate you.
Thank you, Dominic. I forgot to share my shirt that says Vigilosophy on it. So those are some of the encouraging ways that we can live a life of his philosophy of being kind and good and generous to ourselves and to others. Thank you so much for having me on.